But first, we head to Washington, where the Inflation Reduction Act has hit the president's desk. Don Gallagher breaks down what is in the bill and how it will impact the transportation industry. John, how are you this fine Tuesday morning, my friend?
I'm good, Michael. Thanks. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
We're doing great.
Good.
Let's talk a little bit about this inflation reduction bills. We talked about it was kind of an easy pass through both chambers of Congress, and now President Biden has, of course, said he's signing off on it. And what does this mean now for the transportation industry?
Yeah, well, the big thing that I had wrote about last week was I sort of focused in on the tax credit for electric vehicles, and it's a so how that works is it covers the price difference between a electric vehicle and the equivalent type of electric truck, a similar size electric truck, or 30% of the purchase price of the truck, whichever is less. So. It's for trucks that are purchased after December of this year. So the big key factor in this is that it's capped at $40,000. So that's for a medium-sized cargo van or delivery truck. It's that's a decent amount of money toward the price of a vehicle in that last mile deliveries sector, but and it also gives up to a tax credit of up to $100,000 per charger as well. So, I was talking to an electric vehicle policy expert, and you don't have to talk to an expert about this, but I was looking for comments on this, and basically he was saying that's really not enough for a Class 8, that 40,000 cap, whether it's going to move the needle on a long haul Class 8 truck is a big question, if at all. Especially when these things are worth. I didn't realize they were worth quite that much, but like $300,000 minimum for one of these new trucks, up to $400,000, maybe even $500,000. So it's a lot of money. And I was also speaking with the head of the Washington State Trucking Associations, because Washington State is one of those states, California, Oregon, Washington, these are really aggressive on their zero emissions policies and the years that they want them to hit these hurdles. So I asked her about it, and she said that the trucking industry does prefer tax incentives over like a mandate. You have to. This year, an electric truck has to meet this requirement. So she liked that part of it, but again, she agreed that whether a $40,000 tax credit is going to move the needle is sort of it's questionable at best. So and also I was talking to Anne Rundle at ACT Research. She's an expert on she's their electric vehicle, autonomous vehicle expert, and she was saying she brought up another point that there's a Buy America provision in this inflation bill, and it basically requires that the raw materials that go into the battery have to be at some percentage has to be sourced from American sourced commodities. So, I think it's a certain percentage. So basically, that could be. It's in other words, it's not a slam dunk. It's not even if it's a delivery van, or it's not a slam dunk that it's going to cover any type of electric vehicle, or every electric vehicle will qualify for that. And they were talking about that you probably heard in the news on the passenger vehicle side of these EV incentives. They were talking about which cars are going to be, which cars and when will even qualify for this. So that's sort of a little bit of a controversial thing too. So those were a couple of big things. And I had also pointed out a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about after it passed the Senate, that we were talking about the electric. The emissions vehicles that were at the ports and how much that would cover, and so that was the ports were happy about that, and just so long as it doesn't go into autonomous type technology, and and we did. Sorry about that. And we also did talk about the how the truck stop operators aren't too keen on this either because of the of this bill. I'm not talking about the tax credits. I'm just talking here on the fuel incentives for the aviation fuel that they said, which gets a bigger tax incentive than the environmental diesel fuel. And their point is that will make the diesel for the refiners. That's a bigger incentive, so that'll make the diesel fuel more expensive and less available. And so they're basically saying, you're calling this an inflation bill, but that's just going to raise the price of diesel gas for all these truckers, and so the cost of goods is going to go up. So that's not inflation. It'll be the opposite of cutting inflation. It could make more inflation, actually.
So obviously, John, those truck stop operators are really concerned about the diesel thing because that's what's staring them in the face right now. But you mentioned that $100,000 per charger. Have they mentioned anything about their feelings about that? Because obviously, if we're talking about this conversion to electric, truck stops are now going to have to look at what it's going to take to invest in the infrastructure to support those initiatives. And it's going to fall on their shoulders as well. So I'm sure that they probably have some thoughts around that, right?
Yeah, they do. I think that's the whole issue of whether they can allow them to. They don't want to compete with these electric chargers. That's another. Yeah, that's a good point. That's another thing where they say that they don't want those incentives to go to the government being able to compete with them near where their truck stop operates. So those incentives, I guess, will have to go along with the other legislation where they're looking to. Put in money for there's a proposal out there for putting in those are grants actually for the electric vehicle chargers. So that's a good question. How is this going to relate to that? I'm not sure if there are exemptions or there are requirements on those on the battery side. But that's a good question. I didn't speak with ACT about that. I'll have to look into that. It's a good question.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of questions in this bill. On the surface, it seems to me that it wasn't thought out incredibly well. As you pointed out, some of those parts there could actually cause inflation with some of those things. And I don't understand what is going on there. But are there other things in there that are directly towards the consumer to actually hit inflation, other than those that are kind of indirectly there through the transportation? A big chunk of this it was energy and closing all the tax loopholes. That's how they were going to raise a lot of the revenue. And of course, there was the non-freight stuff. There was like prescription drug pricing reform and IRS tax reform and all that stuff. But as far, I tried to pick out the ones that, in terms of the freight industry, I tried to pick out the ones that sort of more directly hit. Yeah. These other general things can, I guess, indirectly help just from a consumer standpoint. I mean, if you take what they're saying with it's a Democrat bill, so and it passed along party lines in both houses. So I mean, so they, as we talked about last time, everyone has their studies and their surveys of an economic analysis of what this is going to do. So when you get into how much more this is going to affect, like indirectly affect our readers and our stakeholders, it sort of goes down to whose version of this, whose analysis are you going to support and agree with? So it's because they both, if you read them, it says, oh, this makes sense. They have these logical steps to how much everyone's going to save. And it just seems like it comes down to a political issue at that point. Yeah.
So, John, with that political issue, obviously the passage of this bill comes about 3 months before midterm elections. Is there a threat of this legislation possibly being rewritten or potentially overturned if you see a difference in party control of the House and the Senate during midterms, or because it's been signed into law by Biden, and obviously he's there for another 2 additional years after midterm elections, that this one's here to stay at least through the duration of his presidency?
Yeah, it would stay. Now, as we've seen in the last administrations, there is like environmental policy, like EPA issues, EPA restrictions and regulations. They went back and forth. I think we talked about this, like the timelines for some of these zero emissions requirements for cars and trucks. Those Obama came up with his administration's EPA said this. Trump administration reversed it or cut it back. The Biden administration it reinstated it, and so things like that. So you're right. This like policy like this, as far as environmental, because this is a very climate oriented. So you could say, okay, I'm going to sign an executive order once a new administration comes in and change it. And I don't know the details of like where each of these provisions falls and if they can just do it in an executive order like that, but. It could. I guess there's a possibility for changing, but I mean, to your point, I mean, in the short term, no, it's going to stay until further notice, until the next administration comes in. But I don't know. I would doubt they can change it. I mean, that seems sort of ridiculous, but who knows? I can't tell anymore.
Yeah. Who knows? Government's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the U.S. it makes it so easy to trade with us and stuff when we change directions every 4 years. It's a piece of cake. Yeah, it's kind of a stupid situation. But did it address anything that is going to impact energy costs in a positive way for people who need energy, like everyone?
You mean energy costs? Yeah. Well, there's like lots of there's tax incentives in there. I didn't read through I sort of try to keep on the freight side of it, but but there are energy there's like for like so I believe there's like solar panel stuff, like tax incentives for your house. So yeah, no, there's a lot. I mean, it was it was supposed to raise $700 and some odd $billion. Yeah. With $400 billion of that going into incentives, grants or incentives. So there's plenty in there. Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's a difficult situation to put in environmental issues and going green with deflationary measures, right? I mean, because you just take the logical conclusion. If you start giving everybody incentives to go on to solar power, that's less money to actually support the traditional power, which means everybody else's rates have to go up in order to have that, because you have to have that capacity when the solar power doesn't go there. It's not a very logical solution to the problem. Yeah, I guess so. But it all comes down to that transition period. Like how long do we allow for? Right. That's where the argument is. Well, I'm not arguing against solar or changing that stuff. I'm just saying mixing that and calling it's going to help inflation is ridiculous, because it's not. Oh, right. I got your point. Yeah, exactly. No, that's true. Inflation is hitting us right now. Yeah, that's really, you're right. I see your point on that. Yeah. Because we're in agreement on changing the fuels, so we got to do something there. Right. Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, I don't think not many of the parties don't think climate change is happening. It's just now, okay, how much is we causing it, and how fast? Yeah. Right. Exactly. All right, John. Thank you for joining us this morning. Great to get your perspective as always. We will talk to you again, I'm sure, next week. Right now, we're going to head over to The Wall. We've got our first carrier update of the morning.